Hello everyone and welcome to another episode of The Jamie Hughes Show. My name as always is Jamie Hughes and today I'm going to be giving you my review of First Man. Now if you want to keep up to date with all the latest movie news and reviews, then make sure you hit that subscribe button, and as always in my videos this review may include spoilers, so you have now been warned. First Man is absolutely incredible. It is breathtaking in points. This movie is absolutely stunning, like a young Burt Reynolds, and I think that nobody is touching Damien Chazelle and Linus Lundgren for Best Director or Best Cinematographer at any award show this year. This film is that good. I think they are going to sweep the board, and as I say, this movie is just visually incredible. Not only the space sequences, but also the stuff on Earth as well was still so well crafted and put together, like visually and technically it just looked beautiful. But I am going to talk about those space sequences a little bit more because they are my favourite part of this movie. I thought the Gemini 8 sequence where Neil starts to lose control of the capsule, the way that was technically put together, and then adding just that layer of sound, and like it was just so immersive, and I was so immersed in that scene and that whole sequence really that I felt like I was next to Neil Armstrong in that little capsule spinning around hoping I wasn't gonna pass out. That's just how well the camera was just so like inclusive and so almost intrusive in those scenes that it really put you at the heart of this movie as well. But the sequence, and it's my favourite sequence in the film, is basically the film's final act, which is essentially the whole Apollo 11 launch from them astronauts walking across the gantry to the end of the film is just, whew, sweet lord, it is amazing. Like, it's probably the best piece of cinema we've had this year, I think. I'm going to go out on a limb and say that, because for me, like, I've never really felt it in the cinema. You know, when people say that you experience stuff in the cinema, like I've had like emotional moments, you know, and had really good connections to the film, but I actually felt like I was on that Apollo 11 rocket, because when all those thrusters started kicking off and like the rocket was just about to launch, I've never felt this before in the cinema, but my seat was shaking. Like, I felt like I was in the rocket. I was just so submersed in this movie, as I say, and during that whole sequence, there's no other way I can describe it really other than that I was just totally overwhelmed by this film. Like, I could feel myself, like, I wasn't crying, but I could feel like I felt like I was gonna cry, but I don't even know why. It was just so visually striking and visually stunning that it just totally overwhelmed me, as I said. And yeah, like, I urge everybody to please go and experience this film in the cinema. It needs to be experienced in the cinema. IMAX if you can, because that'll just blow your mind even more. But yeah, don't like watch this like at home or like pirate it. Please go and see it and experience it in the cinema. It needs to be experienced there. So let's talk about First Man's leading man. I thought Ryan Gosling was great in this movie. He gave a very different portrayal to Neil Armstrong than I thought we were going to get, but it was still really good. And one of the best things that I thought about Ryan Gosling's performance is that he had to use his face and more specifically his eyes quite a lot. There were a lot of elongated shots, like it was just like a close-up of his face, but I think what he did with his eyes was just so well. He allowed like layers of vulnerability at moments to come through with his eyes, and I think the kind of perfect encapsulation of that is towards the very end of the film, where he's doing the space walk out, or the lunar walk out on the moon, and he stops at the crater, and we just get that shot just before he drops his daughter Karen's bracelet into the crater, and it's just that shot of him, and you can see that he's trying so hard not to cry, but it almost feels like that's the end of that for him. He can finally not let Karen go, but he can almost be at peace with her death, because, you know, he's essentially done this for her. I thought that just worked really well, not only with the story but also with Ryan Gosling's performance, because we could see that he was holding something in throughout this film and he'd finally let it go. And as I say, his use of facial expressions works so well in this movie. Now, I've just mentioned it a little bit there, the story, but these kind of next few points all blend nicely together. So there's some positives in this little bit and some negatives as well. They all kind of intertwine and weave quite nicely. But my next point I wanted to make is about more the character than the actual performance, and that is Claire Foy's character, Janet Armstrong. Now, I thought Claire Foy gave a solid performance. She wasn't mind-blowing for me. She didn't like completely blow me away, but I thought she had some really good scenes, and she definitely gave a solid performance. My issue kind of came with the character of Janet Armstrong, because it didn't feel like she was necessary to the story all that much. It felt like a lot of that stuff had just been kind of tacked onto the story to almost give it a little bit more emotional depth, but it didn't really work for me. Now, it did in points, and as I mentioned a little bit earlier on, you obviously get the really harrowing start to this movie where Janet and Neil lose their young daughter Karen. Now as I kind of mentioned, we almost get that story arc that flows through this story with Neil, where he's almost dealing with, it's almost PTSD he's dealing with, where he can't really let go of the death of Karen. He obviously doesn't really talk about her, but then we get that nice climax at the end of the movie where he lets the bracelet go and it falls in, and that's kind of the conclusion of that story. But it kind of felt like adding Janet back into this story, like interjecting it really slowed the pace of the movie down, and for me it didn't really have that emotional punch that I felt it was going to have. Now, it does have good moments, but like overall it just kind of felt like an odd inclusion. And what I think they've tried to do, like there were points in this movie, and this is kind of my only negative for this film, and I say these points kind of tied together, is that this film in points for me felt very reminiscent to when I watched The Post a little bit earlier on this year. And that is where obviously they are retelling historic events, so they can't change too much because people obviously know what happened. So what you kind of got with this movie in points was that they were trying to tell this story, and it almost came across as more of a documentation. So they were just showing you specific, almost key points to this Apollo story, but then, and that was fine, but then they'd also try and interject some like drama into this story as well, and try and kind of flesh out the story around Neil Armstrong, and it just felt a little bit jarring at points. That's not to say it didn't work necessarily, it's that it was just kind of very much a flip-flop from like a very kind of linear stern story to this almost like dramatic injection every now and again. Now, like some bits worked for me, but some bits didn't. But that's like kind of my only negative for this film, is that the story in points just felt a little bit jarring in tone. But overall, this movie worked for me. I thought there was some really great performances, as I said. I thought like there was some really great like poignant moments in this movie as well that definitely made me feel things. But without a doubt, the main reason why this film is so great, as I've mentioned like for 9/10 of this review, is the visuals. It is absolutely breathtaking. And as I've mentioned already in this review, I urge you, please go and see this movie on the big screen, because you deserve it, and this movie deserves it as well. So that is my review of First Man. If you guys have seen the movie, then let me know what you thought about it, as always, down in those comments below. And if you did enjoy this video and you want to keep up to date with all the latest movie news and reviews, then make sure you hit that subscribe button, and I will see you in the very next episode of The Jamie Hughes Show. Ta-ra!